welcome back to False Dichotomies. I'm Cy Castells.
I'm Daria Quinn.
And what are we talking about today?
And today we are talking about the Froyo Gamers YouTube channel and their series of Spongebob SquarePants episode remakes.
Yep, this is peak meme right here.
Yes, and so we're clear, this was one of the Daria picks, so, you know, this should be obvious why.
Yeah, well, although I was the one who picked the history of the entire world, I guess, so...
Well, yeah, but you see, yours is actually about something.
Okay, well, we can discuss whether the Froyo Gamers SpongeBob episode remakes are about anything. What shall we say first?
I found these guys probably about 2 months ago on YouTube.
All right.
And
yeah, I saw that they're pretty recent.
I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Adults in their, I'm assuming, early to mid-20s.
They seem to be in their 20s.
Are overtaking their job at the Yogurtini and taking over their neighborhoods in order to make live-action versions of SpongeBob episodes. And I believe something you said is it.
Yeah, I was feeling that this is stoner YouTube at its finest. But it's funny that we were talking about Dogma last week. Kevin Smith got started by taking over his convenience store that he worked at.
Yes.
Making a film that mostly consisted of him and his buddies talking about the pop culture that they liked. So, come to think of it, there is a cinematic precursor to this kind of work being done.
And when I saw this, I'm like, okay, I must share this with people. And thus how it ended up on our list. And funny thing is, they are not the only ones who do this.
Yeah, that does not surprise me in the slightest.
However, the Froyo Gamers, in my opinion, are the ones that are doing it the best. So that's who we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, their production value is rather impressive considering the resources they're working with.
Well, not only that, but some of the effects are meant to look cheap.
Yes,
because that's sort of the SpongeBob aesthetic.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I think it might be time for me to bring up. I have never ever watched a single episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. What I know of SpongeBob SquarePants comes to me from it being quoted at me and memes.
Yeah. So
when we were discussing doing this episode, and I said to Daria that I have never actually watched SpongeBob, she said that maybe we should save that for later when I've actually familiarized myself with SpongeBob. And then I said, no, I want to challenge myself to consume this particular web series with no knowledge of their source material, or as little knowledge as I could get away with having. Yeah. And I'm glad I did, because it was a fascinating experience. And, it really goes along pretty well with my personal aesthetic. A lot of the media that I consume for my own personal pleasure is commentary about movies and media that I have never seen. At some point, something happened. Apparently, I just spent too much time watching Movie Bob, and I realized that I like film criticism more than I like film. And the majority of the YouTube channels that I follow right now are critics who review or analyze movies, games, books, shows that I have never, consumed. Or maybe I've consumed them after seeing their analysis. So I don't know if that's just me being weird or if that's a trend right now, because I see media getting more and more meta as time gets on.
I have a similar experience with my YouTube viewage. I was at its height a big Channel Awesome fan. This was, of course, before the whole change the channel hashtag and all of the really shady dealings surrounding especially the head of Channel Awesome. I'm trying to remember, Mike Mashad. And of course, some of the more unsavory stories about working with Doug and Rob Walker. I'm still linked to like the Blockbuster Buster and Skiris Lupa's new show, Movie Nights, Phaelus in the Movies, Linkara, the Atop the Fourth Wall. But right now, I'm following a bunch of gamers that are trying to make their way through Mario Maker 2. And the Super Mario Maker Super Expert Mode is like the epitome of troll culture. Super Mario Maker is a game where the users create their own levels. So the super expert level, which is the highest difficulty level, are often stages that will intentionally misdirect you, intentionally kill you, set up traps for you, and the traps get like more and more elaborate. And of course, you have to do all these weird Super Mario tricks that only somebody that has played the game obsessively for decades would know how to do, like P-switch jumps and shell jumps. And I know, I see the look on your face right now, and you're just like,
I'm a little.
What?
I'm
what?
Yeah, my gaze might be a little bit glazed. So yeah.
Sai was looking at me as if I were speaking a completely different language,
And that's fine, because I love listening to foreign languages. Like, yeah.
You're into what it would probably be slightly more intellectual. I think we'd probably have common ground on somebody like Lindsay Ellis.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just rewatching Lindsay Ellis last night. Her 3-parter on The Hobbit.
Yeah.
And she did a recent. Have you seen her most recent video about Game of Thrones?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
So again, I have never seen Game of Thrones, but I've heard you describe bits of it. And then suddenly I understand a little more. Suddenly I understood a little bit more of the context after hearing Lindsay Ellis recap the entire series.
In 20 minutes, which is a difficult thing to do.
And like gets to part of what I like about what I call meta media. This like watching or reading or listening to reviews and analysis of media that you haven't necessarily seen yourself. And that is, at least part of it is, you are watching the story of someone consuming media and processing it. Let's plays are a really good example of this, or streaming video games, is when you don't get to play the game yourself, but you get to watch someone playing the game. So you get to see the player as a character in the story of playing the game.
I think that's why I like watching these people do the Super Mario Maker levels, is because I know deep down if I would ever play this game, it would be a frustrating, hair-pulling, why God did I ever buy this game sort of experience. I do not have the patience to do Kaizo Mario levels. It's just not in me. And so watching other people kind of fall into the traps and whatnot, it's just like, oh man, this level maker was a pure bastard. So yeah, there is a voyeuristic aspect to especially YouTubers.
Yeah.
And that was like the foundation of YouTube for a while before it all started becoming corporatized.
It's not all corporatized, but yeah, it is definitely getting in that direction.
Basically every...
And like, the YouTube itself is definitely restructuring itself to favor the more business-like creators rather than the small creators.
Yeah. It is something that I've heard referred to as the adpocalypse.
And this is creeping into political things as well, because... A lot of the small creators on YouTube aren't necessarily artistic creators. They are political creators. They are making political content, political analysis, commentary, debunking the propaganda that's being put out by the corporate-backed right-wing media. And yes, there is corporate-backed right-wing media. There really isn't any corporate-backed left-wing media. There's corporate backed neoliberal media, basically.
We need to take into consideration non-United States resident listeners. The Overton window of the United States political spectrum is skewed so far to the right that even the left is still on the right. And this is a dichotomy that people in the United States that consider themselves leftists don't always understand.
Yeah. Among the people who are more, I don't want to say true leftists, because that sounds like a no true Scotsman thing, but like the people who are genuinely far left do not consider themselves liberals, whereas most Americans consider liberal and leftist to mean basically the same thing. It's not true. Left is not a synonym for liberal. Liberalism is a distinct political philosophy, which is right now pretty much centrist or even center-right.
Yeah.
Whereas leftism generally refers to, for the people who recognize that distinction, leftism refers to things like socialism, anarchism, communism, anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, not anarcho-capitalism, because that's basically another way of saying libertarian.
Yeah, that is the libertarian that does not want the branding of libertarian. They want to sound cool and punk rock and counterculture, and they're not. They just think they are because they use a cooler term.
Basically, Antifa is left-wing.
Yes.
HuffPo is liberal.
And there is a distinct difference.
So, yes, just keep that in mind.
But
back to Froyo Gamers.
Froyo Gamers!
So, yeah, like I said, just with no knowledge of SpongeBob, I thought this was a very entertaining series. And I could tell that there were some points where they diverged from the original. For instance, there's SpongeBob's pet in the remake is Pikachu, because he's a stuffed Pikachu.
Yeah.
Whereas what was Gary in the?
Gary was a slug.
Oh, okay. Seeing this guy in his 20s running around talking to his stuffed Pikachu, it's just like all kinds of adorable.
Now, something to take into consideration when you watch this there are some inconsistencies as far as casting.
Yes.
And there is some inconsistency about whether or not the Yogurtini is symbolically the Krusty Krab or actually the Krusty Krab.
And that's something that, like, the fact that goes so smoothly, I think, was indicative of something I put down on my notes, and that is, like, the interchangeability of food service chains. So it's like, okay, SpongeBob and his quote-unquote friends, including quote-unquote friend Squidward, who, yes.
We'll get to Squidward.
Yes. Spoilers, I love Squidward. He's my kind of squid. They work at the Krusty Krab, which is a fast food place.
Yes.
And the thing is, all you have to know about it is that it's a fast food place. And then you know absolutely everything you need to know about working there.
Right.
And it goes into detail about how things are run in the Krusty Krab, and how the boss treats his employees, and how the customers treat the employees. And if you really want to, like, have an episode that's entirely centered on this, look at the employee training guide.
Video.
Yeah,
I love that one.
Which is a training video for employees of the Krusty Krab or the Yogurtini. I'm gonna drop the C word here. But that is basically capitalism, and late capitalism in particular.
Oh, yeah.
Where we have supposedly the whole point of, like, capitalistic competition between all of these places serving the same basic service to the same basic customer base. The whole point of competition is so that you can set yourself apart and rise above the rest if you've got what it takes. But instead, they all become so identical that you can just know that everything about the Krusty Krab will map almost perfectly onto the Yogurtini. And it doesn't even seem like any change is happening. Right. Because we all know that they're basically the same animal. Yeah. And that's something that, like, if they had bent over backwards to try to, like, recreate the Krusty Krab, instead of just mapping the Krusty Krab onto the most readily available fast food chain, which serves an entirely different class of food product, and even has a different like serving protocol where it's mostly self-serve.
Yeah.
The fact that it's still so recognizably the same thing, I think says a lot about like market capitalism, especially in the current climate.
On that same thread, the character of Mr. Krabs is probably not even a caricature of late-stage capitalism. It probably is a blatant, straight-on, this is what it is. We can't make a joke out of this.
If anything, he is a kinder and gentler version of the typical service industry boss.
Yeah. Everything is money. When Mr. Krabs becomes aware that a customer is willing to pay money for food after the store closes, the store now becomes a 24/7 store. He penny pinches to extremes, so much so that he holds on to the first dime he ever made and will go to great lengths to protect it, in a sense.
And punish anyone who threatens it. That's the other thing. He views every little scrap of profit he can grab more than the well-being of his employees who helped him raise that profit in the first place.
And then there's the one time where somebody calls the Krusty Krab and they want a pizza. Well, the Krusty Krab doesn't make a pizza. Oh, well, now it does, because we have a paying customer.
The customer is, as they say, always right.
So where do we want to start with a specific episode, or we just kind of want to generalize?
Well, I'll tell you my favorite episode, and we can see if we want to talk about it. But my favorite episode is The Secret Box.
Ah, Secret Box. Patrick has a box with a secret inside, and SpongeBob, being his best friend, is super obsessed with knowing what's in the secret box.
Because it's a secret.
And
just because it's a secret, not for any other reason.
SpongeBob is willing to overshare significantly in order to attempt to win Patrick's trust enough to let him see what's in the secret box.
And that's just in like the first scene. It gets weirder, and at every part of this story there is just so much going on in terms of like the psychology of friendship and of knowledge and of privacy.
Yeah.
I watched this episode with thoughts in my mind about my various committed relationships that I've had over the years and the role of privacy within those relationships. Because at one point, like, SpongeBob has this flex where he's like, you're my best friend. So yeah, you're gonna share your secret with me, right?
Nope.
I shared all of my secrets with you, so you're gonna share your secret with me, right?
Nope.
But then Patrick flips that back on SpongeBob and says, if you are going to persist in trying to get me to share this secret, we will not be friends anymore. It's like, on the one hand, there's this attitude that friendship means sharing everything. And on the other hand, friendship means you respect each other's privacy.
Patrick is showing us actually a very good example of how to stand firm on personal boundaries.
Yeah, because he never says, there's never any doubt in his mind about whether he's going to share this or not. He never tries to manipulate SpongeBob into doing things to, we get the sense at some points that he's kind of taunting SpongeBob with this, knowledge that he will never get. But he never says, oh, I might share if you do this for me. He just says he has a secret, and that's enough to drive SpongeBob up the walls trying to find out what the secret is.
And one of the great things about SpongeBob as a source material is it has absolutely no problem showing the less than favorable sides of all of their characters.
Oh, yes.
Including the main one, SpongeBob. And this is one of those examples where SpongeBob is desperately trying to break through a barrier that he has no right to.
There's so much irony in this episode as well, because we have Patrick saying, the inner machinations of my mind are an enigma, and then it's I don't know what it is in the original, but in the remake, it's his thought bubble as a carton of milk being knocked down. What we know of Patrick's character from all the other episodes is that he's a fucking dumbass. He's like, his brain is as vacant as, like, well, I mean, do starfish even have a central nervous system?
That is something I did not think to research in this.
Oh, but that's another thing. The fact that, for an allegedly stupid cartoon, there's surprisingly many like references to actual sea life biology, like the fact that SpongeBob can cut off bits of himself and those parts will grow back,
And yet he looks like a kitchen sponge.
Yeah. But you know that kitchen sponges used to be sea sponges before they learned how to make them synthetically.
Yes.
So,
So
I don't know.
See, this is what happens when you put too much thought into SpongeBob. Is that it just leads you to that brick wall of like, is this really worth considering?
Yeah, it's
SpongeBob.
Some people reach that realization and think, wow, this is way more complicated than I thought it was. How amazing. And some people are like, you're overthinking this. And I prefer that. I prefer the former.
Right.
Like later in that episode when like SpongeBob sneaks into Patrick's bedroom late at night, because that's not creepy, and like tries to steal his secret box from him. And then like accidentally wakes Patrick up. And Patrick at first thinks that he's a burglar because his true friend SpongeBob would never steal from him.
Right.
And then SpongeBob like proves that he's really SpongeBob by showing him their like best friends forever ring, which in the remake appears to be an engagement ring. Just like further muddying the waters, whether these are friends or lovers or both.
This is SpongeBob. That there comes a point where it's like, yes, you hit the wall and it's kind of amazing, and then this is really deep. But then there's other times where, are SpongeBob and Patrick lovers? Are they friends? Does it really matter? Does it really change anything?
Yeah, it does. I don't think it does change anything because aren't they both asexual creatures anyway?
That is back to biology. I did not think I needed to research.
We should probably have done a little more research on this on this SpongeBob analysis. But
I didn't know I have a biology test.
So it's like this horribly ironic symbolism of SpongeBob proving that he has been the one to betray Patrick by also proving that his like commitment to their friendship via showing him this ring is like, aw, that is like so heartbreaking in a way. And then Patrick like forgives him and shows him what's in the box, and it's a piece of string, and that satisfies SpongeBob's curiosity, and he like feels relieved, and he goes home, and he's like, and immediately he says, wait till I go tell Pikachu. So he proving that as soon as he knows what the secret is, he's immediately gonna go tell someone else, which is like, don't just, apparently SpongeBob has absolutely no respect for secrecy, whereas Patrick has like totally double crossed him, and like the string was a red herring, and if you pull the string, you open the secret compartment and you find an unflattering picture of SpongeBob, which they dug up an unflattering picture of the actor who played SpongeBob to show on screen, which I thought was amazing. It was very unflattering, and I loved it. And that shows like a couple of things at once. Number one, Patrick is clever enough to come up with this complicated security mechanism, but also his deepest, darkest secret is something that, if shared, would embarrass his best friend. And he's chosen to keep that secret, proving once and for all that Patrick was right all along. Friendship is about respecting people's privacy. And that's like, I love that so much.
The thing about it is, you would hope that the target audience for SpongeBob, which would be roughly 5 to 12-year-old kids, would see an episode like that and learn something about boundaries about friendship, about respect. You would hope. Whether or not they do, I don't know. But,
I mean, it's good that the episode is there with that lesson in it. And I wouldn't be surprised if some kids actually had the seeds of that knowledge planted in them by that episode. Yeah.
There is also an episode called The Idiot Box.
Yes. And that's a good one, too. And that's one that's very focused on Squidward.
Yes. Now, Squidward, as a person who has just been recently introduced to and seems to love Squidward, please explain Squidward to our audience.
He's a fucking stick in the mud. He's a joyless creature. He's a cynic. Okay, so here's something I wrote down. Basically, all of these episodes focus on some dynamic between two contrasting characters. And Idiot Box is Spongebob and Patrick are basically one in their actions and their attitudes in this episode, and their foil for this episode is Squidward. So they balance each other out in this and other episodes. The spectrum between Spongebob and Squidward is the spectrum between innocence and cynicism. And in this episode, it's kind of played straight in the sense that Squidward has to learn to set aside his cynicism in order to learn about the importance of imagination.
Imagination.
Yes. But there are other episodes where that same spectrum is sort of weighted in the other direction, where the cynicism is the one where it's that's shown to be more correct or more valuable in that particular instance. And I'm thinking of the pizza delivery episode.
Yeah.
Where SpongeBob's trust in the meritocracy, and if he just works hard enough, then he will be a good employee. Whereas Squidward knows there's going to be no reward for doing this well. It's just going to be hard work for nothing. You may as well just eat the goddamn pizza. As it turns out, when SpongeBob has his hopes crushed and he fails to live up to this impossible standard that both his boss and the customer have set, Squidward is the one who avenges him.
So
with a pizza straight to the face.
So to sort of recap this episode, a person calls the Krusty Krab and orders a pizza. Mr. Krabs, being the capitalist that he is, makes a pizza and has Squidward deliver it. Squidward is not about to do this alone, though, so he has SpongeBob tag along. SpongeBob ends up driving their boat so far into the middle of nowhere that they are completely lost. And the boat is wrecked or drives away or whatever. So they're stranded, and SpongeBob is using the tricks of the pioneers in an attempt to find their way to the customer.
And meanwhile, Squidward is like, let's just eat the pizza. and SpongeBob is like, no, the pizza's for the customer, because the customer is like the center of the retail or the food service workers universe and must never, ever be disappointed.
So they ultimately find the customer, and the customer throws a fit over not having his Dr. Kelp. And he goes on this rant about, haven't you once thought of the customer? To SpongeBob, who has basically done everything possible up to and including driving a rock to the customer's house, because this is SpongeBob and they do strange things like drive rocks. And this guy is just like, where's my drink? Where's my fucking drink? What the fuck is wrong with you?
And he never ordered one in the first place.
To our knowledge.
Yeah, but like, it's actually like, if you read the website Not Always Right, which is an excellent source of dark humor and catharsis for service industry workers, quite often a customer will neglect to order something and
throw a fit.
And then throw a fit when it's not included in their order. Yeah, it's retail and food service and service industry employees in America right now and in other places are horribly abused on a regular basis. And it's fucked up.
These places are chronically understaffed. The staff that is there is chronically overworked. The companies involved are doing everything possible to get out of having to do federally mandated things as far as your work, as far as time off, paid time off, insurance, whatever else. So you could be considered a full-time employee and only pull like 39 and a half hours, which is just enough for you to be full-time, but not enough for you to have to be covered under a medical plan for that job.
Yeah.
That's like one example.
And like knowing all this and knowing that that is true within the SpongeBob universe.
Yeah.
Because there are entire episodes devoted to that fucked up dynamic. Squidward's attitude is completely justified. There's like some episodes where he's kind of like, it's kind of portrayed as like he's the curmudgeon and he needs to lighten up. But in universe, he is correct. Mm-hmm. He does not like his job. We find out that when he loses his job, he is unable to find another one. So he does not have a choice. Mm-hmm. He literally becomes homeless and utterly depressed and devastated when he loses his job. So his choice is between homelessness and working a job he hates. And oh my God, how many of us are like exactly in that exact scenario right now? Yeah. That's a fucked up place to be in. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate Squidward's existence as a character, right, and that he is like basically the voice of all the disaffected workers out there, because we need his cynicism. And as we see, he's the one like literally throwing pizzas at the people who are abusing his fellow workers. So I like to think that Squidward is like somewhere out there just ready to become a militant teamster. You know, he's like, I want him on the front lines of my like strike picket.
There is a SpongeBob episode.
Okay.
Where Squidward heads a strike.
Oh, I want to see it so bad.
And I am only vaguely remembering some of the details now, but SpongeBob goes on strike with him.
Oh, yeah.
Until SpongeBob realizes that being on strike means he doesn't get to work at his job.
And he loves working at his job.
Loves working at the Krusty Krab.
Yeah, even when he's being abused.
Now, this may show that SpongeBob is a bit of a pushover, but in the episode where Squidward loses his job and SpongeBob is willing to help him out, we find out that SpongeBob has limits. Mm-hmm. And, of course, Squidward
he has like a really, really high threshold for abuse, but he does have limits. Yeah. And ultimately, having a really high threshold for abuse really is not good for a person health-wise. But, like, yeah, I don't know. Everybody in this show is kind of fucked up in the head in some way, except maybe Patrick. That's probably because he's too young to be fucked up. There's not enough substance in his brain for it to get fucked up in there.
On the subject of Squidward as an disgruntled employee, we have the Krusty Krab training episode.
Don't be like this guy.
Don't be a Squidward. Of course, there's it's don't be a York here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because everybody gets their names changed to protect the innocent.
So, Poofy.
People obtain our frozen yogurt.
What do you think Poofy was in...
I have
the original.
No fucking clue.
No clue at all? No. Not even going to try to take a guess?
People obtain our...
You're almost there.
King.
People obtain our patties. Poop.
Okay. All right.
I gave you a chance. I gave you a chance to guess.
Poop. I mean, I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, probably not. But
so the live-action remake was cleaner than the original in that case.
And there is that point where Patrick is attempting to order, and Squidward is just waiting for, like... Exactly. So, of course, the narrator is what? Try Poofy. Would you like a sample cup? Okay. Would you like a drink with it? And Squidward just starts beating his head into the register. How many times in our lives, in our stupid Joe jobs, were we actually doing that?
And like, okay, if you ever...
Like literally smashing our head into the register because of the stupidity of the customer.
Or like indecisiveness even. Because it's like, give me a pack of Newports. Wait, how much are those?
Oh God!
And like my finger is like trembling above the Newport key. Are you gonna buy it or not? And they're like, you know what? Give me 2. No. Give me 1. All right. Can I see your ID? Oh, I forgot it at home. Is that okay? No, it's not, ma'am.
Cigarette customers are some of the most insidious people you will ever deal with in your life.
And I don't blame them though, because number one, they're addicted to something that is like horribly expensive. Mm-hmm. So like, yes, they want to buy it because they're addicted to it, but they don't want to buy it because it's killing them and it's really expensive. So I can understand them being indecisive.
It's not the indecisive part that I've had the trouble with though. Mm-hmm. The trouble I have had is the customer that complains about the price as if I had a choice in the matter.
Yeah, or like I worked at a place that didn't take coupons for cigarettes, and wow, people are so offended if you don't take coupons. Yeah, I had a someone who claimed to be a loyal customer for years
that you've never seen in your life.
That I never seen in my life. Although he knew my boss by first name, so who knows? Everybody knew my boss by first name, but who knows?
Well, that's what happens when you wear a name tag.
And well, he was a friendly guy too, but he found out that we don't take coupons for cigarettes, and he like flipped out, and he told me that he had been a loyal customer for years, but that he wasn't anymore, and he'd never come back because of this. And I'm like, okay,
72 hours later.
I don't know if he came back or not, because I did not care enough about that job to actually remember who I saw. So, like, who knows? If he did come back, at least he was spared the embarrassment of having me, like, recognize him.
In my experience, I'm never shopping here again lasts about 72 hours. Yeah. Especially if you're dealing with cigarettes or alcohol.
Uh-huh. The addictive substances.
Yes. And people who are in there a lot. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how often I see you. I see hundreds of people a day. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to remember your face or your birthday or whatever if I only see you every once in a while. Mm-hmm. Or even if I see you all the time. If I ask for ID, show me your fucking ID. Don't bitch about it. Because here's what's going to happen if you bitch about it. I'm going to ask you every time from now on. Because I'm going to remember who you are. And you can go to my manager, but they're not going to do anything because it's the law, motherfucker.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the people who want you not only to not card them, but also remember exactly what their preferred brand is. And like,
I was able to do that for 2 people tops. And you know why I did it for the 2 people tops? Because it was the only guy that came in at 2 a.m. and he got the same thing every day. Yeah. And it was the only guy that came in at like 4 o'clock and got the same thing every day. And I did the midnight shift. So basically, some nights, these were the only 2 people that would come before the big coffee rush.
So there was one guy whose cigarette brand I remembered every single time. It wasn't his real name, but I called him Eric the Red because he had red hair, red beard, usually wore a red bandana. He worked at Target across the street, so he had a red shirt. He drove a red car, and he got
Red.
No, he got Maverick Red.
Maverick Red.
Because he worked at Target, and Maverick is cheaper.
Yes.
So, yes, Eric the Red, with the red hair, red beard, red bandana, red shirt, red car, gets Maverick Red.
Yeah, you have to have, like, a lot of these, like... But you have to stand out.
But Eric the Red never expected me to remember that. He always came in and said, can I have some Maverick Reds. And you know, because he was the one who not only was super duper predictable, but didn't expect me to predict him. He was the one for whom I would get his cigarettes out before he came into the door. Because I would see him and I'd be like, Maverick Red.
So, and that's, you know, the draining thing about working in these kind of jobs is the insane expectations that are put on
you. You have
you.
1,000 bosses.
Minimum.
Yeah. And they all treat you like shit, with a few exceptions.
Yeah.
And like, I think it's worse when your customer base are people of lower classes themselves. Because, and this is my experience as someone who has worked in places where the customer base was like highly educated and highly paid and lower classes, the lower class customers are loads worse until you get like to a certain level of income where you feel you're entitled to everything.
Right.
And I think that's because they're being treated like that at their own jobs. Then they get off their shift and they gotta go get their cigarettes or their beer or their candy or whatever they use to numb their pain. And they, for the first time in their day, or possibly in their whole week, they get to tell someone else what to do.
Yeah. And
punish them if they do it wrong. So, yeah, they're gonna take that opportunity.
That's late stage capitalism for you.
Yeah.
Everybody is pit against one another for limited resources. Limited because some jackass decided to hoard it all. He has billions upon billions of dollars and he sits on it. And then they wonder why we want them to pay higher taxes. I mean, if you're just going to sit on $1.5 billion or whatever the hell Jeff Bezos has these days, you know, you have enough money to solve homeless problems in a major city or fix the water in Flint, Michigan, or, you know, fix whatever damage happened in Puerto Rico from the last major natural disaster, or, you know, anything, everything. Instead, you know, you and Elon Musk, there you're spending all that money trying to go to Mars. Like, hey, I want to go to Mars too, but you know how I want to go to Mars? Through NASA. For you paying our fucking taxes and being able to fund government programs that help everybody, not just you. Because if we left this all down to you guys, you'd keep Velcro for yourself. You'd keep the stuff that made the cellular phone possible. You would have kept that to yourself. Jacked up the prices. It wouldn't have been open source. It wouldn't have been something that everybody could have gotten a hold of.
Yeah, because like remember, these are things that NASA developed using taxpayer money, and then made like freely available for the rest of the world to use.
Yeah.
If you can basically obtain all the research that NASA does, whether it's astronomical research or engineering research, like fuel efficiency research.
Yeah, it's all public domain.
They don't like hold on to their IP the way that corporations do. Yeah, they're in it to like further the cause of scientific knowledge and engineering, and like,
which is the point of science. Whether
Yeah,
or
well,
not, one of the points of science.
Yeah, it's like it's the point that science had before capitalism got hold of it.
Yeah. And this is why a single dose of insulin can cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
Yep.
And insulin was supposed to be free because its creator wanted it to be free. But it didn't happen that way.
So, want to talk about stupidity?
You mean more so?
Yeah. I was also thinking about, I posted a little bit about this on social media, the archetype of the, like, duo of stupids who one of them might be slightly smarter than the other, and that's what I think of when I think of Patrick and SpongeBob.
Yeah.
I crowdsourced a bunch of information on like examples of this throughout media, but where I really find that this archetype really shines is in like one-off jokes. And I'll tell you one of my favorite examples of this, if you don't mind. Two blonde men are working on building a house, and they're putting up wall, and so they're taking nails and like hammering them into the wall. And one of them notices that the other guy will take a nail out of the bag and look at it, and sometimes he will look at it and then use it, and sometimes he'll look at it and then throw it out. And he like watches him do that for a few minutes, and then he's like, "Why are you throwing away half the nails?" And the first guy says, "Well, if I pull it out of the bag and it's pointed at the wall, that means it's good and I can use it. But if I pull it out of the bag and it's pointed away from the wall, then it's defective and I can't use it, so I gotta throw it away." And then
there's more.
And then the second guy thinks about this for a while. It makes a lot of sense, and he's nodding and stuff. And then he keeps working. And then after a little while, he turns to his friend and he says, "You idiot! The nails that are facing away from the wall aren't defective. They're made for the other side of the house."
Oh, God. That is such Beavis and Butthead thinking right there. Are you sure they were two blonde guys and they just weren't Beavis and Butthead? Because that sounds like an episode of Beavis and Butthead.
It was told to me as two blonde guys, but one of the rare blonde jokes that is about men instead of women.
Right.
And then I told this joke to my my grandpa Jack when he was still alive. Mm-hmm. And he said that he'd heard this joke when he was a kid, only when he was a kid, it was about Polish men. Mm. And that was like the first like introduction I had to the concept of like today's blonde jokes, or, you know, the 90s is blonde jokes, because I don't think anyone's doing blonde jokes anymore.
Oh, because too many people bleach their hair anyway.
Yeah, and like also a lot of blonde jokes are a little bit misogynistic, at least.
A little bit?
Yeah. But the blonde jokes of the more recent decades used to be Polish jokes or Irish jokes, or if you go back far enough, Indian jokes. Mm-hmm. So they're all fucking bigotry.
Yeah.
But there's the humor that's based on stupidity is universal. Mm-hmm. And one thing I really love to do is when I find these like ethnicity-based stupidity jokes, I like to just like erase the ethnic specifics from them and just retell them as stupidity jokes. Mm-hmm. Because a story about a stupid person is funny no matter who that stupid person is.
Usually, yes.
And I personally find it like really funny to make it about like the dominant group. It recently occurred to me that I kind of want to start telling that joke about the two people building the house as being about two straight cis men. Because you know that trans men wouldn't be like that.
Of course not. You know, but I think the interesting part of that archetype is that oftentimes the smart one of each part of the duo thinks they're the smart one.
Yeah. And we see this in like the interactions between SpongeBob and Patrick. Mm-hmm. Because like SpongeBob thinks that he's smarter than Patrick. And in some ways, yes, he is. Yeah. He's a little bit more, like, he quite often serves as the role of Patrick's teacher. Mm-hmm. However, we know that SpongeBob is often wrong. In particular, he's wrong about, like, getting stars on the star chart in the classroom is not like the most important thing in the world, you know? Mm-hmm. He thinks that he's really important because he has the most stars on the star chart, or because he gets all these awards for whatever it is he does, or because he's the best damn employee at the Krusty Krab. But we know that all of these victories are pretty hollow in the grand scheme of things. And it's a little bit pathetic that he's taking so much pride in them. And it's a little bit pathetic that he takes so much pride in being smarter than Patrick when Patrick is barely even a functioning creature, you know? Yeah. And then we see that even Patrick has wisdom, as we saw in the Secret Box episode, where he has, like, apparently the inner machinations of his mind really are an enigma. So what I really love about these, like, stories about two dumb people, one of whom is slightly less dumb and feels, like, superior because of it, is that it reminds us that feeling superior to someone doesn't make you, like, superior.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling smarter than someone doesn't make you smart. Finding out that someone else is wrong doesn't make you right. And that's something we all need to remember on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And it's like, I see it so often in, like, public discourse that we'll have, like, someone will be like, look, I proved this one person wrong, therefore I'm right. And that's not how it works.
Right.
You're not either right or wrong. There are a million ways to be wrong, and there's basically one way to be right, if that.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't figured out what that is yet.
Yes.
So calm down. That's what I like about the story about the two guys in the house, because, like, this guy thinks that he's got it figured out just because he's figured out that his buddy's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't figured it out. He's just as fucking wrong as... He's just as wrong. He's just wrong in a different way. And that's true of so many people in so many, like, situations.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, I think that these kinds of stories aren't just stories we tell in order to, like, make fun of each other or to, like, get a laugh. These are actual folk wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Well, how about that time SpongeBob and Patrick discovered the word fuck?
Yes. That's a bad word.
Okay, well, we can't specifically say that it probably was the word fuck.
Yeah, it's dinged out in every instance it's said. But SpongeBob and Patrick discover a bad word, and they start saying it. And
it's
I
one
really
of those sentence enhancers.
It's a sentence enhancer. It's Patrick describes it as like it's like adding some spice to your sentence. And that's the most accurate description of swearing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
It is like it makes your sentences spicier. But apparently you add too much spice to something and, like, you piss people off.
Yep.
Like, imagine if you're serving someone dinner and you just, like, emptied an entire bottle of chili powder into it. You might lose some friends that day.
Oh.
So it's like, they find out that, yes, it is fun to swear, but not at work. Because their boss gets pissed off. And then they find out that their boss, in some occasions, will also say bad words.
Mm-hmm.
And then they run to tell his mother. So it's like, what I felt that episode really felt like it was saying was not only be a little bit more discreet about the way you talk, and just because something is new to you doesn't mean you gotta just run and spray it all over the place.
Right.
But also that anyone who judges you is probably revealing a little bit about their own behavior as well.
And another thing to note is that Mr. Krabs refers to 13 words you can't say. Whereas Squidward is like, wasn't it 7? It's like, no, not if you're a sailor. So, sometimes the more mature jokes do make it through, as the 7 words are an allusion to a famous George Carlin bit about the 7 words you can't say on television.
Yeah, and sailors know more of them. So, but fun story, both of my parents were in the Navy. Allegedly, my mother taught some of the sailors in her unit some new words.
Oh. Did she ever disclose what these were?
It she actually was capitalizing on her knowledge of British culture because the word was bugger.
Ah.
Yes.
Bugger means fuck.
Well, it means specifically butt fuck. And the history of the word bugger is actually really fascinating. It's derived from the name of a old religious sect that believed that sexual chastity involved not doing any sex that could get you pregnant.
Ah.
So they did some buggery.
And there is a Garfunkel and Oates song called The Loophole.
Oh, God.
That is essentially Fuck Me in the Ass Because I Love Jesus.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Garfunkel and Oates at all. They are...
I think that I've seen, like, one of their videos. I'm not super familiar with them.
Okay, yeah, they are two comedian women, and they write songs about stuff.
All right. I can dig it. I might be getting them confused in my head with the Double Clicks, who also do funny songs.
Okay.
About stuff.
Okay.
But, yeah, I think that, like, so yeah, that's just another example of, like, this, I mentioned to you before that, like, I had a friend for many years who, like, absolutely hated SpongeBob, and she had, like, she has children now, and, before she had children of her own, she worked as a nanny for someone else's children, and before that, she was an older sibling who took care of a much younger sibling. So she only ever experienced SpongeBob as something that the children were watching that she found annoying. And she told me that the reason she found it annoying was because it had absolutely no substance and it was just weird for the sake of weird and it has no messages or meanings or anything in it. And what I have found out through watching these remakes is that she was wrong. There's a lot of substance in this show. Yeah, there's really weird and absurd humor in it. But just because something's weird doesn't mean it's weird for the sake of weird.
Right.
That's the other thing. A lot of people have... I'm a weirdo. You're a weirdo. And, like, I've had people tell me that, like, oh, you're just being weird for the sake of being weird and you're just trying to be different. And I'm like, no, I'm not trying to be different. I'm actually like this. Or if it's not something that I, quote, can't help, it's something that I am doing for a reason.
Yeah.
I think SpongeBob is weird for a reason. For instance, the fact that, like, these are sea creatures, there's no existing stereotypes about starfish and sponges and squids and crabs. These are mostly creatures that we haven't really thought of as living animals for most of human history. Right. So we didn't necessarily have, like, archetypes of, like, the fox being cunning or the owl being wise, you know?
Right.
So they were able to, like, create these characters that rely on, like, long-held archetypes in our culture and completely divorce them from, like, the material reality of the characters, with the effect that we can do jokes that could easily have been, like, racist stereotype jokes. But because they're in this other world where those things just have no relation to our world, it's just basically scrubbed of all the cultural baggage. It
also shows that a lot of comedy is lazy. Now, of course, good comedy is not lazy, but a lot of what passes as comedy is very lazy. And that's, you know, your racist jokes, your blonde jokes, your anything that punches down on an identity or anything like that. I do have a thing about SpongeBob, and I described it to you as weird for the sake of weird. I don't see that as a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes being weird for the sake of weird is perfectly fine. Weird Al Yankovic has made a career out of this. It's even in his name.
Yes.
So, you know, I don't think that is a bad thing. I think that you are allowed to just laugh at silly, absurd things. That's why silly and absurd things exist. You know, we are supposed to take pleasure and laugh at the absurd.
Now, we're not just talking about SpongeBob. We're talking about the SpongeBob remakes by a bunch of gamers in a froyo store. Or in their home, or in the street outside of their homes. And, like, the show itself is absurd.
Yes.
The fact that these grown men are devoting so much of their time and resources to recreating episodes of a cartoon from years ago, it ramps up the absurdity by like tenfold at least.
Oh yeah.
And occasionally they will like comment on that, like in like there's this moment where like SpongeBob is talking to his Pikachu, and like I don't remember what the exact line is.
It's about something about Disney. Please don't. It's like we're talking about it. We're talking about this Disney property. It's owned by Disney. Please don't demonetize us.
Yeah, or like commenting on how like absurd it is that these grown men are doing this. That's meme culture. Meme culture is you take something that's existing and you do something with it, and then you put it back into the internet,
right?
So that someone later on can repeat the process. This episode is a memification of the memification of the SpongeBob,
yes,
which is a memification of the properties that came before it that used the same tropes,
right?
And someday, God willing, someone will memify this. To an extent, SpongeBob is kind of made for this, though. And it's like I shared with you a video that came out recently that was a Movies with Mikey video about Shrek.
Right.
And in it, he talks about how Shrek was originally a picture book that kids liked even if they couldn't read it. They just liked this funny green ogre character and his funny green life. And now Shrek the movie is the movies is like has taken on a life of its own, and now the big green ogre man in his big green life is a meme. You can appreciate Shrek the meme without knowing anything about the story of the movie,
right,
or of the book it was based on, which is completely different from the story in the movie. So like the whole aesthetic of Shrek then is basically an image completely divorced from its context. I think that says something about what meme culture is now. It is taking images and displacing them. I think the results are pretty amazing, personally.
Yeah, meme culture is very intriguing, and the lengths and the depths that it goes. Something you commented on a while back, not on the show, but on Facebook. I shared something about Yoda having a dream about the scene where they tell Anakin that he'll sit on the council, but he won't be a Jedi Master. And it didn't go the same way. It was, Yoda was really realizing, it's like, wait, no, this isn't how it went. Anakin, we told you you couldn't be, we told you weren't a master. You bitched about it. We didn't look back. We didn't think about what we were doing. And then Yoda wakes up from the dream on Dagobah. And I feel that is a theme of the current trilogy of Star Wars. I believe the Jedi tree burning scene in The Last Jedi is maybe one of the most important scenes in the entire saga.
I agree.
Because Yoda and Luke Skywalker are talking about the hubris of the Jedi and how the Jedi have basically failed the old Republic, the new, everything. These are old ideas that no longer work. It is time to forge a new one.
Oh, but everybody hates Rey, so it can't be her.
Except, of course, she is almost the perfect character to represent a new form of Jedi.
Because she's not anybody's special offspring.
And that is something fanboys hated. They hated the fact that she came from nothing. And I'm watching this, and I'm seeing the obvious villain, Kylo Ren, who is nice guying the fuck out of Rey. Until Rey decides, no, I don't want to be, I don't want to rule the galaxy with you. You're an asshole. And he's like, oh, well, your parents, they were just a bunch of junkies and shit. And they just ditched you. They didn't matter, neither do you. And people got upset at that. And I'm just thinking, but that makes sense. Why wouldn't tying Rey to say Obi-Wan Kenobi or Luke Skywalker or Han and Leia, wouldn't tying them to those people make this a very convoluted story?
Well, it comes down to, so there's a trope, and it goes way back into like the Middle Ages and further. Are actually, come to think of it, I can think of examples that go back to prehistory, like to oral traditions that are older than history. And that is the trope of this common person who turns out to have been descendant of royalty, or somebody special at least.
Yeah.
There's a theory, I don't know how much evidence there is for it, I'm not a folklorist, a theory that Robin Hood, the guy who stole from the rich and gave to the poor, was originally a commoner's folk hero who was like ostensibly common born, and he like would help his fellow commoners by stealing from the rich. Basically the original communist, or one of them anyway. But then when the story became really popular and it started being co-opted by the upper classes, they were like, we don't really like this story about a commoner stealing from the upper classes because we're upper class. So what if we made it Sir Robin of Locksley, who is a noble person who lost his fortune, and now it's some non-royal person, maybe a sheriff, who's fucking everything up and is his main rival.
Yeah, it is the corruption of the Sheriff of Nottingham rather than the ineptitude of Prince John.
Yes. So what happens is, what used to be a story about a common person waging class warfare against the royalty is now a noble person waging war against a common person who's become too powerful.
Yeah. It's like the difference between the Disney Robin Hood movie and the Kevin Costner Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. Because in the Disney version, Robin doesn't have like this grand, past or whatever. He's just part of a group of thieves that are trying, the Sheriff of Nottingham is basically a adult. And Prince John is a simpering, whining little, completely impotent leader who cries for his mommy every time something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And it's really just about embarrassing these high-born people with a guy that's just kind of like a fox in the middle of the woods, whereas
Again,
Robin Hood...
that cunning fox that I brought up
Yeah,
earlier.
it's like, and then of course you have Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, which goes into the Robin of Locksley. He goes to the... He fights in the Crusades. He comes home and finds that he's lost everything. The Sheriff of Nottingham has strung up his father for being a witch and claimed all his property. And it's about a rich guy getting his stuff back. Whereas the Disney version was really just about a guy that was making sure that poor people could afford to live and, feed themselves and stuff.
And where this comes back to SpongeBob is what another thing that meme culture does is it takes our pop culture, which is usually owned by massive corporate conglomerates, like Disney, like Warner Brothers, like Time Warner, which is
Time Warner.
I can't even keep track of which of them are.
We got Disney, we got Warner Brothers, which is part of Time Warner, which is we got Sony, we got Viacom, we've got okay. I've exhausted my ability.
It's an oligarchy.
Yeah,
the oligarchy is attempting to have complete control over culture, basically, by owning all of the intellectual property for all of these things that mean like lots of really important stuff to lots of people who have no resources to like become part of it themselves. But meme culture basically displaces these properties from their owners. These are SpongeBob episodes made not by a corporation, but by a bunch of guys who have a YouTube channel using whatever they have on hand. And as a result, we can have SpongeBob without being beholden to the owners of SpongeBob. And the same is true of like fan fiction. I can't do that thing where I list off lots of examples.
Fan fiction, ROM hacks, and video games as an example. There are people who try to independently publish their own stuff and whatnot, which sometimes is basically a copy-paste from their fan fiction and just given different names and stuff. And
that's
sometimes they make a whole lot of money, James.
that's that's where 50 Shades of Grey came from. It was a Twilight fanfic where they just changed the names of the main characters.
Yeah.
And it turned out that, and actually that something really cool that I read. Mm-hmm. Isn't it fascinating that when you took a vampire character and you wanted to make him into a human, the easiest way to do that is to make him a billionaire?
Yeah.
And then who is the first person to compare billionaires to vampires? But Karl Marx.
Question you posed on social media. Is this a remake or is this an adaptation?
Or is it a retelling? Or is it a rerun? Because reruns are a thing in cartoons. And okay, so
SpongeBob has been in production for almost 20 years. Production shut down last year.
Wow.
So that's how long this show has been going.
I did not realize it was that long running.
It's not quite as prolific as The Simpsons, but it's up there. SpongeBob will probably play in reruns for at least another 2 decades.
Yeah, it might be the new Looney Tunes.
Yeah, so reruns and SpongeBob. We should
totally do Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
Someday. It's hard to find Looney Tunes for streaming on demand, though, because Warner Brothers has their IP in a tight fist.
And it's not exactly easy to find good home video releases. They're usually very menial collections, and it's we know that you did 300-400 shorts in the period between 1930 and 1970.
Yeah. There's some compelling evidence that Bugs Bunny is gender fluid, because he seems pretty happy in female drag. Somebody pointed out that when they made Tiny Toons, each character's younger counterpart in Tiny Toons is the opposite gender of the original character they're based on. Except for the characters based on Bugs, they had to have a male and a female bunny.
Also Daffy. There is a male and a female dog. Plucky.
So what does that say about Daffy then?
Let's just be honest here. They may be gender fluid. They may be gender who gives a crap.
Yeah. They're cartoons. Who gives a crap?
I mean,
the answer is we do. These are our cartoons, goddammit. Cartoons are a vital aspect of culture. And yes, I think they belong to the people who love them. Yeah. Not to the massive corporate conglomerations who technically own them. Yeah. That's why I think that definitely we should be able to steal them and use them. Like Robin Hood.
That has been a take I have had towards copyright law for about my entire time since attempting to be a YouTuber. Yeah. Up till now, a lot of the music that I have produced as Save Yourself 7598 includes a lot of unlicensed samples. I blatantly rip a speech from George Carlin about the nature of war and how it's a fight of who's got the bigger dick as an intro to a song about 9/11. And, the line in it is, now here's a good excuse to offer up our children as a ritual sacrifice to the gods of revenge. So, I have a very lax view of copyright, which is probably why at least one of my YouTube channels died. Because I blatantly violated, and I don't care because I'm not making any money off of this anyway. I care about the message. Yeah. And part of the reason why I haven't gotten back into YouTubing after I lost that first channel on a serious basis was a combination of depression, lack of resources, and the realization that no matter what I do, it's probably just going to get demonetized and screwed with, and and I just don't have the energy to fight for what I feel like is a truer version of fair use. Yeah. I feel like the fair use laws as they are right now are draconian.
Then you should probably check out Eric Taxon and his video essays. He's a musician. I put him on the list for his music in particular, but he also does really good video essays. And he's done some really good ones about IP law, and I think his views match yours pretty well. Yeah. So back to the question of, is this a remake or an adaptation or a retelling or whatever? A remake I think of as something that the person or group who did it originally is like trying again.
Okay.
Or it could be like a completely different set of artists working on it, but they're still being hired by the same company.
Okay.
That would be a remake because it's like the same entity doing the same thing again.
Okay.
An adaptation it's either made by different people or in a different medium,
right,
or both. So we have Victor Hugo actually adapted his own novel, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, originally called Notre Dame de Paris, into a stage play. And then it was the stage play that eventually underwent lots and lots of readaptations in various forms until it eventually turned into the Disney movie Hunchback of Notre Dame. And that is a fascinating story, and there's a Lindsay Ellis video about that too.
Yes, there is.
That's a very good one. So that's the same artist adapting his own work into a different medium. Or there's also somebody adapting a comic book into a movie, as we see all the time nowadays.
Yeah.
I would say that this is at very least an adaptation because it's not only done by different people, but it's also in what I would call a different medium.
Okay.
Because it's not animated, it is live action.
Right.
And I think a cartoon and live action are completely different.
Oh, yeah.
Especially a cartoon like SpongeBob, where it's so the art style is so surreal, and it shows in like the incredible lengths to which the actors and the cinematographers have to go to make the cartoonish reality recognizable in the live action context. We see the actors do these really unrealistic movements with their bodies and like physically impossible perspectives. And I consider that like it's a way of invoking the cartoon original in a live action setting, which really draws attention to the nature of animation and what makes an animation a cartoon as opposed to just like a realistic animation.
Right.
And in that sense, it's an adaptation that draws attention to the original rather than trying to stand fully on its own feet.
Oh, yeah.
And there's something to that. In that case, it's not just an adaptation, it is also an homage, which also reminded me of another video essay I saw recently about Loving Vincent, which is the movie about the life of Vincent van Gogh. And it is animated using oil paintings for each frame of the animation. Okay. Which took years and lots of painters' time. And you think those old-fashioned hand-drawn animations where each frame is a drawing, you think that sounds like a laborious pursuit until you realize that each of these frames was an oil painting. Yeah. And oil painting requires that you do many, many layers of paint on the canvas because oil paint is slightly translucent. Right. That's why it looks so beautiful. So yes, this was an immense labor, and it's because it is a movie animated with oil paintings, and it is about the life of a painter whose medium was oil painting. It is an adaptation of his story that draws attention to the original, and not only to his story as an artist, but to the art that he himself created.
And another thing in the way of how the Froyo gamers draw attention to the fact that something is out of their span as far as to recreate. There are a lot of fourth wall jokes. Yes. As far as there's a scene in Pineapple Fever where Squidward, SpongeBob, and Patrick are all quarantined into SpongeBob's house because of a massive heat wave. And there is a sequence where Patrick ages rapidly because he's trying to solve this puzzle, and it's just taxing him. And the Froyo gamers, when it came to this scene, they were just like, oh, hi, we're the Froyo gamers, and there's no way we could recreate this scene, so just go with it.
Yeah. When they come across the limitations of their technology, they are forced to admit it. Yeah. Now, they could have chosen to like just skip that gag. Because that's another thing about the gags that are in this show is that they depend on repetition ad nauseum of like taking a simple gag and taking it way beyond the limits of rationality. And the thing is, like, they could have cut out like that portion of that gag and it would still be funny, but it wouldn't be as absurd as the original. And their goal is to be at least as absurd as the original. So they gotta like lean into it and say, look, this was so over the top that even we can't recreate it. That's how ridiculous it is. And just by knowing that, then we get like the sense of, wow, this is impressive.
Yeah. And that's not to discount the times where they try it anyway with either a very limited resource or possibly the, hey, you know, if we make this look cheap, it'll even be funnier.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot with YouTubers is sometimes it is a limitation of what we can do. Sometimes it is we do it for the sake of that.
I'm reminded of, I really like Vines. And I was actually very pleased to see that Froyo Gamers have also done like recreations of popular Vines.
Yes.
Which I really enjoyed that as well. But one of the things that happens in Vines is that it's the ultimate like limited resource audio-visual experience because this is mostly done by people in their free time because no one's a professional Viner.
Yeah.
It's usually something that either a professional is doing to supplement their career or it's something that amateurs are doing to, in some cases, launch their career or in order to like fill their free time as they're, you know, going
or, you know, the
life.
basic attention seeking.
Yeah. Very well, it's all attention seeking. God damn it. We'd be here all day. But one of the tropes in Vines is people demonstrating that they are a different character by putting some arbitrary object on their head. And I think it was Jay Versace who is most like famous for that because he would like balance a vacuum cleaner on his head, you know. It's like he just to show when I'm wearing this on my head, it means I am my mom, you know. It's just so that they could have like a dialogue.
Right.
You end up having to like figure out a visual shorthand that is instantly recognizable, even if it isn't like at all realistic. So, okay, Jay Versace wearing a vacuum balanced on his head is Jay Versace's mom. All we need to know is that means that he's playing his mom.
Right.
We don't have to see any evidence that this is what his mom would look like.
Right.
And that's like what I see in the SpongeBob remakes too, is like they will just have some visual signifier that a certain thing is a certain thing. Like I think it was like at one point the dime was like a roll of tape or something like that. It was like, that doesn't look like a dime. But all we ought to know is that he's holding it when he says he found his dime.
Well, this is also where being familiar with SpongeBob, the SpongeBob cartoon, plays into. The first dime that Mr. Krabs ever had is like this ancient relic from a far gone era. It's this giant plank of metal. And, you know, they're like, that's a dime? It's like, I got it a really long time ago. So the fact that it is a roll of tape falls into your hypothesis very well, but it also is symbolic of something that was actually from the show.
Yeah. But it has to be different from the other dimes. That's all we really need from there.
Yes. So I do just want to say that, yes, check out the Froyo Gamers on YouTube. They do SpongeBob remakes. They do Let's Plays and gamer videos. They recreate Vines. They've recreated music videos. The one in particular I can think of is Red Hot Chili Peppers Don't Stop.
Nice.
And it looks about as cheap as you would expect it to from guys that are doing this in their basement.
And they're very talented at what they do.
Yes.
I think they're hilarious, and I am planning to look more into their stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, do check them out. They are a very versatile group of YouTubers, and I had tried very hard to find out whether or not these guys own that Yogurtini, or if they just work at the Yogurtini,
or if they're just good buddies with the owner of the Yogurtini.
Yeah. But I would definitely say check out their Yogurtini. Go support the business, if for no better reason than you might get sucked into a live-action SpongeBob episode yourself.
Yeah, are they in California, I think?
Arizona.
I
believe it's Glendale, Arizona.
I know I saw that it was that they were somewhere in a desert.
Yeah. So, yeah, they're in Arizona. But, yeah, and, support these guys because they are putting out good content and they seem to be having fun with it, which is key for a YouTuber because you're not going to make a living doing that. There was a time where some people could have, but nowadays you need to have a Patreon and a very, very high subscriber count and a very loyal audience to be making any money at all.
Yep.
And that is, of course, when you don't have like a real job outside of it. So
yeah, I think that's all I've got to say. So until next time. This has been False Dichotomies. I'm Cy Castells.
I'm Daria Quinn, and thank you for spending your time with us.